Hello everyone, this is Lucy05 and welcome to the Comic Command Central Toy Review. In today's review, we're looking at the 2006 release by ToyBiz of the Marvel Legends House of M box set series, and we're looking at the House of M version of Iron Man. Now, I don't want to babble too long because there's a lot of things to talk about this figure, so let's get on with the review. Now let's take a look at the flight base stand. Now the base stand itself has two joints and is supported by these two screws, but every time you move the joint itself, it will loosen up the screws. As you can see just now, this entire thing here is just plugs into the base itself. You notice that it just popped off because it loosened up really easily. It's not really secure at all. And at the bottom here, you got the hole here to place it on the wall. After what you just saw, do you really want to put this entire flight stand onto the wall? Now let's take a look at the gun itself, or the cannon. The entire cannon paint job is very shiny, very metallic blue, but as you can see, it's also warped. The plastic is warped. Most probably it stayed in the packaging way too long and it just warped it. Now there's a hole here for the figure to place it on the figure's right arm. Only the right arm, which later I'll show it to you guys. At the bottom here, you place the belt feet at the end of the belt feet right into the hole here. Very nicely detailed. Let's take a look at the humongous jetpack. Now this jetpack here is really huge. You got the belt feet, which is actually soft rubber. Now when you want to try to put the belt feet, this one is already connected to the jetpack, affixed to it, quite tight, and I don't think you can actually remove this. But this one, you can actually place it straight into the cannon itself. And if you want to place it in, make sure you push it all the way in, because sometimes it pop off quite easily. Now the entire jetpack itself is really huge, but there's a lot of paint smudges. You notice there's paint smudge here, there's paint smudge there, really bad quality control problem, a lot of gray paint just smeared on the edges here, on the top part here. I'm not too sure why are they hiring monkeys to do quality control problem. Blue paint job smudged in this section here. My god, what's wrong with this jetpack? There's a lot of paint smudges on the jetpack. Now overall the design is very nice except for the paint job, and it's very hollow. Inside of this too, and this entire piece here is very hollowed, so you have to be careful and not, let it fall to the floor or break. By the looks of it, it will break very easily too. There's a peg here to place it at the back of the figure. And there's a hole at the bottom of the thruster where you're supposed to put a flight stand peg there. Now as you notice, this is already broke because you have to be careful. It will stretch the plastic. If you place it inside and then you try to pull it out, because it stays in very tightly, and when you try to pull it out, you have to be careful. Me, I didn't know, so my bad. I broke the piece and the ball is inside the jetpack, so my bad there. I didn't know it was that cheap of a plastic. Now let's take a look at the rest of the stuff. Now let's take a look at the paint job of the figure. Now the paint job is actually very nice. It does look very reminiscent to the old classic red and gold, except for the yellow part here. The so-called gold is more towards to dull yellow. It looks very wetted down, which is a nice touch. I really like it. And the entire figure don't have problems with paint smudges. Everything looks very nice. You got the linings going on. Every single details has been lined up very nicely. You got the lines, the black lines all painted on. There's some smudges, tiny little bit. I'm not too concerned about that. Now what I'm really concerned, well, not too heavily, is because of the eyes. Eyes has a different kind of paint job. It's more lighter yellow, but you're hardly able to see it properly because it's the same sort of a color to the face itself, except the eyes is a bit more lighter. So I really wish they do something about that. There's some red smudge here on the shoulder. That's still okay. Now let's take a look at the sculpt. The sculpt is absolutely detailed, very detailed. It looks very much manga inspired Iron Man suit, as we noticed, especially on the head itself. Reminds me of Gundam for some reason. Now the head is very detailed, as you can see here. In the back of the body itself, the front piece of the armor, legs, very nicely sculpted, nicely molded in. You've got the bottom of the feet, which is the thrusters, the entire forearm, very nicely done. What I really wanted to complain is, what's wrong with the fingers here? This left hand, the fingers are way more thinner compared to the right hand, and the fingers are ultimately very thin. So I really don't like that. Then you have this really, well, obstructing butt wings strapped to the back of it, well, his butt, and you got this really ugly exposed screws at the back here. It's not really that nice, but at least the paint job here is very well done. It's shiny. Now let's take a look at the articulation. The head can actually turn 360 degrees, but can't pivot up and down. I'm not too sure if you can even call this as a joint. There's not much of an articulation on the neck there, except you can turn all the way around. The torso joint can actually go downwards but can't bend backwards, stuck like that. Waist joint here can turn 360 degrees. Now it has shoulder blade joint. Problem is, I'm not too sure what's the point for them to actually add the shoulder blade if you can only move this much. Shoulders can turn 360 degrees and, well, spread this far due to the amount of space they put onto the joints itself. Upper bicep can turn 360 degrees, double jointed elbow. The forearm can turn 360 degrees, and the wrist here can move ever so slightly because it's being hindered by the forearm itself. And the fingers, each of the 4 fingers except for the thumb, is articulate. Next we have the hip joint. The hip joint is very nice. It goes forward. It doesn't go backwards because it's hindered by the butt piece. I'm not talking about the wings, I'm literally talking about the butt itself. Then it goes to the side, not by much, because it's also hindered by the thigh piece. And the thigh can swivel 360 degrees. The knee joint can bend this far, double jointed. And the calf joint can turn 360 degrees. Ankle joint goes downward, upward, side to side, just a tiny little bit. And toe articulation that bends upward. Now he is rather limited in articulation, but the overall design, the paint job, well, at least most of the paint job, and the overall design of the sculpt itself is absolutely amazing. And this is the final version of everything being placed to the figure itself. It looks really amazing. As you notice, I already have the figure placed on the flight stand, despite that the ball joint that's connected to the bottom part of the thruster itself already broke. You can still place it in as long as he's sitting on to this section here. It still looks very nice. Now the problem with this figure is it has very limited articulation. Well, not too badly. I'm not too sure why they even bother with putting this figure with the shoulder blades where it doesn't do much, and the figure's neck doesn't even pivot up or down, and the torso there doesn't even go backwards. But the rest of the articulation is still alright. I really don't like the very thin fingers they gave this figure, and I really don't like the exposed screws at the back of his butt. Then there's also a lot of sloppy paint jobs for the jetpack itself. But overall, the figure looks really great. So if I'm going to give a rating out of this, I'm just going to give it a 9 out of 10. So I thank you all for watching. This is Lucy05 and I'm signing off.